In a world where everyone shouts to be heard, where words multiply endlessly and noise replaces meaning, there exists a power that few understand and even fewer master. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "Silence is deeper than all words. Silence is the last refuge of suffering and joy." But what if I told you that silence is not merely a refuge, but the deadliest weapon in the arsenal of human influence? Nietzsche observed that we live in an age of endless chatter, where weak men use 1,000 words to say what a strong man communicates with a single glance. Society conditions us to believe that the one who speaks the most, who argues best, who persuades with eloquence, is the one who holds power. This is one of the greatest illusions of modernity. Have you noticed how the most influential people you know rarely feel the need to justify themselves? How they command attention not by what they say, but by what they choose not to say. In the next few minutes, we will uncover the secrets of the silent power that Nietzsche encoded in his philosophy. We are not just going to talk about staying quiet. We will explore how to transform silence into a magnetic force that commands respect, establishes authority, and shapes perceptions without uttering a single word of persuasion. Get ready to discover why, in Nietzsche's own words, "He who knows how to speak also knows when to be silent." First law of silent power. Silence creates a psychological vacuum that others feel compelled to fill, revealing their true intentions in the process. Nietzsche understood that nature abhors a vacuum, both physical and psychological. When you refuse to fill silence, you force others to expose themselves, revealing their fears, desires, and real motivations. The ordinary man feels uncomfortable with silence and instinctively tries to fill it, often with information he would never reveal under direct questioning. This is the principle of the will to power in its subtlest form. You gain power through the voluntary revelation of others, not through forced extraction. During the negotiations preceding World War II, Stalin was a master of this technique. When Churchill and Roosevelt made complex proposals, Stalin often responded with long, penetrating silences. Inevitably, Western second law, true authority never announces itself. It manifests through silent confidence that requires no explanation. Nietzsche despised those who felt the need to proclaim their importance, seeing it as a sign of internal insecurity. The Übermensch does not need to tell others who he is. His presence is the declaration. When you feel the need to explain your value, position, or qualifications, you inadvertently signal that others have the right to question them. Authoritative silence communicates that your position is so solid it requires no defense. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor admired by Nietzsche, was known for conducting Senate meetings with minimal words. When senators debated complex issues fiercely, Aurelius often listened in silence for hours. When he finally spoke, his few words carried absolute weight, not because he argued better, but because his third law, while others speak, the one who observes in silence accumulates information and detects patterns invisible to speakers. Nietzsche was a consummate observer of human nature. He understood that people reveal much more through body language, hesitations, and omissions than through carefully chosen words. When you speak, you are focused on transmitting your message. When you listen in silence, your mental capacity is free to analyze not only what is being said, but how, when, and why it is being said. This is a monumental strategic advantage. Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes based on real observational methods, exemplifies this principle perfectly. In A Study in Scarlet, Holmes solves a complex case by silently observing, while Scotland Yard debates elaborate theories. He notices details others miss: the position of a body, specific footprints, the absence of certain evidence. Fourth law: a well-cultivated silent presence attracts more attention than the most elaborate performance. Nietzsche spoke of the eternal return, the idea that we should live each moment as if it were to repeat infinitely. Applied to social presence, this means cultivating a quality of attention and awareness so intense that others are drawn to your energy, even when you are not doing anything overtly attractive. True magnetism does not come from trying to impress, but from being so fully present that you naturally become a focal point. Gary Cooper, the legendary Hollywood actor, was famous for dominating entire scenes with silent presence. In High Noon, he conveys tension, determination, and inner conflict almost entirely through subtle facial expressions and body language. Director Fred Zinnemann reported that Cooper often requested to reduce his lines, preferring to communicate. So far, we have uncovered the foundations of silent power, according to Nietzsche. You have learned to use silence to extract information, establish authority without proclaiming it, observe while others expose themselves, and create magnetism through pure presence. These are the foundations upon which truly superior influence is built. But these are just the foundations. What comes next are the advanced tactics, the methods Nietzsche considered so powerful that he hid them in the subtext of his most complex aphorisms. Prepare to discover how silence can become your deadliest weapon, not to destroy, but to create an authority so natural that others will gravitate towards you without understanding exactly why. Fifth law: when everyone speaks, the one who chooses strategic silence automatically becomes the most interesting figure in the room. Nietzsche understood that the human mind operates by contrast and comparison. In a world saturated with noise, overcommunication, and constant performance, silence becomes exotic, mysterious, and irresistibly attractive. The Superman does not compete at the same level as others. He transcends the game entirely, creating his own rules. When you refuse to participate in the general cacophony, you force others to come to your level. During the famous 18th century Parisian salons, Voltaire frequently dominated gatherings, not through brilliant speeches, but through calculated silences. While other philosophers debated passionately, Voltaire sat quietly with a slight smile, observing. Eventually, the conversation inevitably turned to him. And sixth law: ambiguous silence forces others to project their own fears and desires onto it, giving you power over their interpretations. Nietzsche was a master of productive ambiguity. His aphorisms can be interpreted in multiple ways, allowing each reader to find their own truth. The same principle applies to interpersonal silence. When you do not immediately clarify your intentions or reactions, others fill the void with their own projections, often revealing more about themselves than you would ever discover through direct questions. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa is perhaps the most famous example of this technique applied to art. Her enigmatic smile, essentially a visual silence, has intrigued observers for centuries. Each person sees something different in her expression. Some see sadness, others contentment, some mystery, others wisdom. Leonardo created a work that becomes more powerful precisely because it does not explicitly declare its message. Similarly, Lincoln was famous for enigmatic pauses in speeches, allowing audiences to interpret his intentions according to their political hopes. Skillful leaders often respond to controversial questions with thoughtful silence, allowing different factions to interpret their stance favorably and keeping diverse coalitions united. Practice the incomplete response. When asked for your opinion on something controversial, provide part of the answer and then stop, allowing others to fill the gaps. Second, use neutral but attentive facial expressions that can be interpreted as approval or disapproval, depending on the observer's perspective. Seventh law: knowing when to withdraw silently is as powerful as knowing when to speak. Exiting at the right moment multiplies the impact of your presence. Nietzsche often wrote about the importance of knowing when to stop, be it a work, a relationship, or a conversation. The superior man understands that prolonging any interaction dilutes its power. Strategic withdrawal creates nostalgia, sparks curiosity, and leaves others wanting more. It is a sophisticated application of scarcity to social presence. Charles de Gaulle mastered this art during his negotiations as President of France. During crises threatening to break governmental coalitions, de Gaulle often retreated to his rural estate without explanation. There were no dramatic threats or ultimatums, just silent absence. Invariably within days, representatives from all factions would make pilgrimages to his home, begging for his return. Eighth law: silence can be an act of supreme compassion. Allowing others to fully express themselves without interruption or judgment creates deeper connections than any advice could. This is perhaps the most sophisticated application of silent power that Nietzsche intuited even in his seemingly harsh philosophy. The true Superman does not need to dominate through force or manipulation. He can elevate others through the superior quality of his attention. By offering compassionate silence, you give the rarest gift in modern society: full presence without agenda. Carl Jung, the psychologist who developed many ideas parallel to Nietzsche, revolutionized therapy through active silence. Instead of bombarding patients with interpretations and advice, Jung often sat in compassionate silence, allowing patients to discover their own truths. He reported that through Nietzsche's wisdom, we have unveiled the 8 pillars of silent power. You have learned to create magnetic vacuums that compel others to reveal themselves, to establish authority through silent confidence, to observe while others expose themselves, and to cultivate magnetic presence that dispenses with performances. More profoundly, you discovered how to use dramatic contrast to stand out, how productive ambiguity forces others to project desires onto you, how strategic withdrawal multiplies impact, and how compassionate silence builds authentic connections more powerful than words. These are not merely manipulation techniques. They are expressions of Nietzschean philosophy in its most refined form. The true Superman does not need to shout to be heard, does not need to argue to convince, does not need to justify to be respected. He understands that in a world saturated with noise, silence becomes the... But remember Nietzsche's own words: be careful when fighting monsters, lest you become one yourself. The power of silence can be used to elevate or dominate, to create authentic connections, or manipulate coldly. Use this knowledge to protect yourself from those who would fill you with empty words and hollow promises. Use it to create mental space in a noisy world, to develop your observational and intuitive abilities, to build relationships based on genuine presence rather than constant performance. Above all, remember that the most powerful silence of all is born from self-confidence. The inner certainty that requires no external validation and allows you to be fully yourself without explanations or justifications. In the comments below, share. Which of these 8 laws of silent power challenges your beliefs about influence and communication the most? And in which area of your life can you start experimenting with fewer words and more meaningful presence? If this exploration of the subtlest aspects of human psychology through Nietzsche's eyes expanded your understanding of true personal power, subscribe to this channel. We will continue diving into the secrets that great philosophers and psychologists have hidden in their works. Knowledge that can transform not only how you interact with others, but also how you understand yourself. And if you feel that this deep dive into the power of silence has added real value to your perspective, if you see applications for your personal or professional life, your like signals that we should continue producing content of this philosophical depth and practical application.